kids bond over the behaviors that men do that are harmful.
When I was maybe 15 years old, I started working at a Christian summer camp that was for boys, a Christian boys summer camp. But there were 3 to 4 women on campgrounds. 1 was the nurse and 3 were the cooks. I know. But for the first few years that I worked there, there was a very strong anti-cook culture. That the cooks were bad. They needed to be opposed. And it was because they were women. Like, women should not be here. This is a boys' camp. Even though they are literally feeding us, we were all anti-women. And I've thought a lot about that. Like, where did that come from? Why was that a thing? Now, I would love to get a PhD in gender studies and societal implications of these sorts of things, because it is fascinating and terrifying to me. So all you're hearing here is just my random thoughts. But I believe that we are all living under a system that patriarchy has imposed upon us, and men are the chosen golden children of patriarchy. But the specific role that men have to play within patriarchy and capitalism is one of dominance. It is their job, men's job under patriarchy, to have dominance, to assert dominance over others, and to normalize dominance. Because when dominance is normalized, the rich and the powerful can do that to everyone, and we're used to it. So to be a man means you have to have dominance in one area of your life. For a lot of men, that is having dominance over a woman. And the reason you win a woman and marry her is so that you can be in charge of a household and play out those like traditional Christian gender roles of man of the house. But this also plays out in work situations. And it plays out between men, too. When men are together, they are vying for who's dominant of this group. And you can assert your dominance by saying, well, I have this woman who is on this level of the social hierarchy, so I am the most dominant here. And it's all this like jockeying for position. But it's my experience and my observation that men perform their gender for other men, not for women, because they're all vying for that top spot within manhood, whatever their immediate circle is. Everyone wants to be considered the top man, the alpha, if you will. And the thought is literally like, if I get to be the alpha, if I'm the top dog here, then women will want me and I will get to do whatever I want and I will have won the patriarchal game, right? It doesn't actually work out that way, but they are convinced. So when you're in conversation, you talk over people and you assert yourself and you assume to know things that you don't actually know about, and you interrupt people. And when you're talking about women, you talk down and you kind of assert like, look how powerful and dominant I am over these women. I'm going to tear them apart. I'm going to tear them down. I'm going to rip them to shreds verbally, or I'm going to actually advocate for real violence against women, because that's showing you how powerful of a man I am. I am only concerned about me, and look how powerful I am. I am the alpha dog. I am to be feared. And if I can assert enough that I am to be feared, then I will become the most dominant man in my social circle, and therefore I will somehow win the game, which is supposed to result in all the things that I want. I mean, it's all a lie. You have to remember, this is all a patriarchal lie, but this is the role that men are supposed to play. They're supposed to be dominating people, dominating women, dominating work culture, dominating over other race, all the things. Domination, I believe, is the number one value of patriarchy. And patriarchy is lying to men. it's promising things that it will not actually deliver, but most men have bought into that lie, and they believe it. So they will turn against any man, any woman, any person, doesn't matter. They will turn against anyone to try to assert dominance because they believe that lie. Here's what I'm thinking. If you're dating a man and he doesn't take out his journal and take notes, actual physical notes, when you are speaking, here's the game. This is how patriarchy has set up the game for men. 1, your gender is never guaranteed. You have to prove your gender all the time. And any man in society can take away your gender and call you a girl and say you're not a real man. And not just men, but women have been conditioned to do this to men too. I get that. I'm going to speak to men because that's how I was conditioned and that's what I understand. But your gender is not guaranteed. It has to be earned and has to be proven. And then 2, if you are not a man, if you can't prove your gender, you're of no value. You're worthless as a human being. And we see this with how we treat women. We see this how we treat trans and gay people. And 3, you are promised great power and wealth and prestige and dominance and control. You can basically do whatever you want if you win this game. So we have the negative reinforcement of you're constantly under the threat of losing a core piece of your identity, your man card. And we have the positive reinforcement of being promised wealth and power and prestige, which it doesn't actually deliver those things, but just keep that. Yeah. But because men are the chosen darlings of patriarchy, it's harder for them to break out of a system that keeps promising them wealth and prestige and power because they want that to be true. And in all of that, they're protected and insulated in a way that makes them very fragile. And their fragility makes them even more compliant. And like a spoiled child, it's always somebody else's fault, specifically women. And it's women's responsibility to fix all these bad feelings that I'm having inside. So for me, the only way that I was really able to deconstruct manhood and masculinity was for me to leave the system and move into this nebulous genderqueer space where I'm no longer attached to the concept of being a man as a core piece of my identity. I've left that behind. I'm not a man. I'm not particularly a woman. I'm in this other space. And that has given me the freedom from the outside to look back at masculinity and look at it with a more objective lens. In the same way as when I left Christianity, when I was inside Christianity, so much of my concept of self was wrapped up in being a Christian that it didn't allow me to see clearly. Imagine like standing up against a brick wall, like nose touching the wall. How many bricks can you see? 2, 3? And when you step back, and the farther you step back, the more you're able to see the full picture. But men are so enveloped in the patriarchal system. It's so a part of their core concept of self and their identity that they can't. The only way to really see the reality of what's going on is for somebody else to point it out and for them to have enough stability, internal stability in their concept of self to be able to consider really hard realities. So maybe that can happen in therapy. Maybe that can happen as you explore gender for yourself or you explore sexuality for yourself. But without some major slap in the face life event or very intentional openness to being confronted by like a therapist that you're paying for and not your spouse, not the women in your life, someone you're paying for, it's going to be really hard because so much of your concept of self is tied to these things. You're up against that brick wall and you can't see. So I've never been a woman, and I can't speak with any experiential knowledge on the experience of women, even white women. But looking at it from the outside in, I do have some thoughts that I'm very open with, and it's very like open-handed here because I might be wrong. But the way that patriarchy sets up the game for women is that women are dependent on men to be sexy. They're dependent on men to be acceptable. The system has set it up so that women have to go to men to be granted sexiness, attraction, appeal, acceptableness, value. So women are indoctrinated to think that man over there can give me worth, self-worth, and I need to go get that from him. And men are trained to think, I have the ability to distribute your beauty and your acceptableness and your lovableness. So I think it's a very different experience than how men are set up within patriarchy. But it creates a dependency system where women are willing to perpetuate patriarchy because they think that if they play that game well, they're like the boys woman. Like, you know, when women are like, oh, I'm not like the other girls, you know, like all my friends are guys. I think there's a term for that. But when women play the patriarchy game, they're more likely to get their rewards from the system, which is, here you go. You're acceptable. You're valuable. You're lovable. You're beautiful. You're sexy. All these things, women have to go to men who distribute it to them. That's what I see. That's what I think. And I think that's why women tend to advance the patriarchy. Now you bring in the race element where white women do that, and I wonder if women of color are just more used to bucking the system because the system was never made for you. And they're just willing to throw it all out. Whereas white women are still kind of enraptured with the promises of patriarchy. So men, as the chosen darlings of patriarchy, are promised the most, and I think it's hardest for men to break out of patriarchy because they're promised to gain the most power and position and prestige and honor and respect and all the things that patriarchy promises them and never delivers. White women are probably the next in line after that for those who are told that they will benefit. And then as you get farther and farther away from the center, people are more likely to recognize, like, oh, this isn't even a winnable game. Nobody wins this game. And they're more willing to just throw it all away. As we all should. We all should. Especially men who are at the epicenter of the whole system.